So welcome back. This is Nightflight, and today we welcome back Eve Lorgen. And what will be our topic of the day? Yeah, whole bunch of things about experiences, abductees, infiltration of certain groups with not so benevolent agendas. So we would see. Welcome, Eve.
Well, thank you for having me. And I know it's been a while, and I've been very busy working on different projects. So I thought today I could kind of open up with something that actually came up to me and was reaffirmed, basically the concept of the counterfeit spirit. And that's actually mentioned in some of the Gnostic tractates in the Nag Hammadi library and some of the scriptures, where the description of counterfeit spirit was also known in some of the scriptural ways as the adversary, but it seems to have been used more as the counterfeit spirit when it references what they call the archontic demiurge and that, quote, counterfeit spirit, which infuses a lot of the controlling forces of this world and what they call the governors and some of the principalities and authorities, which are kind of manipulating what I call the lower pleroma world. So that concept came up because what I realized is that the counterfeit spirit, if we can understand its essence and its, let's say, its modus operandi, and I found out about that really by being involved with counseling so many people who've had the narcissistic abuse type of thing going on in their relationships, whether it was a paranormal manipulated one or something just, quote, human. But if we look behind the behaviors and the syndromes that happen, then I can see, wait a minute, what's behind it all? Like if we went to the root source of what's compelling these behaviors through people or the entities running them is the counterfeit spirit. And so in the earliest description, I think in the Nag Hammadi and even in the Bible, some of the simplistic terms they used was how I think they even called it the adversary, which sometimes they would also describe as Satan or the Satans, which is plural, would seek to kill, destroy, kill, I don't know, and destroy, steal, kill, and destroy. Okay, so it would be theft and destroying and killing. But this same dynamic can be played out in a relationship in many other permutations, which would be like the your cat loves this the love bombing and the devaluation and the discard and the gaslighting, which is really someone who's impressing on you a way to manipulate your perception to believe something other than the truth inside you that might be perceiving something more clearly. And so really the gaslighting is they're telling you lies so you believe lies so they can impress their reality and their self on you until they replace you with a little them that they can control and manipulate, while they've actually harvested the life force and the corrupted the purity of the soul as part of just what they do as a type of parasite. So once you see that playing out in many different ways behind many different narratives or religions or people or personality types, I think it's more pronounced in the dramatic, what I call dark side of Cupid relationship relations that I wrote about. So that was something that I thought, if we can come to a clearer way of understanding this at the root, and then find out what is the countermeasure and the remedy for this corruption. And really, it's a type of harvesting and stealing identity. So, and memory, right? And truth. So then, okay, that tells me, okay, now that we can recognize it for what it is, how it plays out, then we can find a remedy. So this is really like, how would we heal from like a really devastating narcissistic abuse pattern of relationships, which may have like that paranormal factor where there's like an extra attached entity or a high level I won't even call it a demon. Sometimes I think it's a high-level fallen angel or a type of alien, or a lot of times it's people perceive it as like a reptilian or a draconian or another type of being. And now I lost my track here, but if we can notice that, then we can find out how we can remedy this. But I think they are the ones that are working behind many personality disordered people who, for one reason or another, lost their original connection to pure essence, truth, soul, and have adopted the mask, which is the false identity that's disconnected from the real authentic person. And so whenever there's a mask, the mask is the counterfeit. And the mask and the counterfeit always requires energy to reify itself and project itself on someone else. And then while stealing the original essence of someone else. So a lot of times you see this envy and jealousy thing going on with, let's say, people who counterfeit others. We see this on the internet, like on YouTube all the time, where, someone has a particular book or idea or something, and it's immediately like counterfeited and hijacked by another fake, it could be an AI bot, or it could be a real person who takes it and then they change it and corrupt it and pervert it. And then pretty soon the original is nothing like what it was because they took the memory away from that. They smear campaigned it and then they replaced it with them, which became more and more corrupt until the memory of the original or the knowledge of the original is like, what was that?
Mm-hmm.
So some of the problems is that there's been such a normalization of the counterfeit spirit corruption over time, which is a long game, by the way, by these high-level fallen ones, whoever they are, because they live for thousands of years. So it's a long game, so that we may not notice in our short lifetimes what's taking place with respect to how we normalize and don't really notice the corruption of our spirits, the corruption of morals, the changing of our original essence or even our DNA to create a type of counterfeit. So, so I'll just stop for a minute because I know that was a mouthful, but it definitely relates to not only the original love bite with what Barbara Bartholick had known and never really talked about publicly, but also I'm noticing this more and more with the dark side of Cupid relationships where there's more anomalous things going on that suggest much more than what's going on a human level.
Mm.
You
What you just said reminded me of something. Some people say there are, when it comes to angels, the 72 most important ones, allegedly. And they here in German they call them Chenin. I don't know the English word for that, but op Evie. But opposite of that,
What's your
yeah,
cat's name? What was your cat's name again?
Evie.
She has my name.
Yeah, your name is Eve.
So often. Yeah. She's like, see me, see me. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the little terrorist has to be in the show, of course.
Oh.
So, okay, let's say here on this side you have these so-called angels. And then on the other side, you have the 72 demons that correspond to the other energy. That is most likely the 72 Goetia demons.
Oh.
And they explain that this is because everything has to be in balance. But I really can't buy that story because my perception is it's pretty out of balance. And what we would call the bad guys are really in charge. So where exactly is the balance here?
Oh, that's good. Because I actually perceive it that way too. And I think actually, it was one of my earlier abductee interviewees. Her name was Marit, and I did my maybe 4 or 5 interviews, and actually one of them is already printed in the Dark Side of Cupid with a question and answer thing. But one of the things that she intuitively got right away was that the aliens, at least the ones that had the more malevolent positions, they sought to corrupt the purity of the soul. So a lot of the corruption has to do with trying to change our moral compass, or manipulate us in such a way, like I think one of the big ones is in relationships where um, if we're set up in relationships where, let's say, they'll do the thing where they tweak, I call it the tweak the emotional and sexual energy knobs, so that you have this extreme love obsession and sexual passion that's through the roof, and the soulmate thing, which really it does connect, a lot of times it does connect your hearts and souls together, so it feels super wow. And it is, at least for one person, sometimes both. But then over time, this dynamic will play out that starts showing this narcissistic calling card that just can't help but show itself through, the obsession, the chaos, the drama, and, the paranormal activity, and the switching off, and the neglect, and the little game playing that seems to happen synchronistically, but it happens more often through, let's say, one partner who might have more of the qualities of the narcissistic personality disorder or extreme unrecovered trauma, so that they're more easily manipulated by whatever's running them. And then so they will be played by these compulsions that they can't seem to help or know where it's coming from, that affects the other partner in a way that like really triggers their emotions and causes them to be pining away in unrequited love and feeling really hurt and just being devastated. So what's being shown here and normalized within these people's lives, many of them abductees or people who've been taken, is that, okay, well, this is what a relationship is. This is what love is. Love is the counterfeit. Love is the narcissist. Oh, that's normal to have this twin flame thing where they run away and they treat you like crap and they neglect you, and you're going through this horrendous emotional devastation that's like an emotional concentration camp from hell. Oh, but that's normal. That's just what it is. So, if you've ever been
Those
from an
those
abused family,
relationships are supposed to be complicated.
oh, it's supposed to be toxic. Like, no, it's not. No, and the dark doesn't have to be with the light. Guess what? It doesn't have to be there at all. In fact, according to the Gnostics, how I understand it, if there is a true upper pleroma, as they call it, which is the eternal unbegotten of the pure and undefiled and uncorrupted, eternal, let's say, God of all, with all his hierarchy of angels and beings, that's uncorrupted light. Here is corrupted light.
Yeah.
And that they actually see this in the yin and yang, where you see the yang and the yin and the yin and the yang. Well, like, well, it needs to be there to balance out. Well, you know what? I don't know about you. You don't need a hellraiser in your house to balance out the peace, or or an abuser just to balance out the one who's not an abuser. You know what I mean? I mean, that's how stupid it is. If you ask me, that's dumb. Even though I learned Taoism and chemistry and I know about balanced equations and all that, but I see that this is being used as a narrative of a bypass to normalize and make us blind to the counterfeit spirit, which is essentially a form of a liar. So the whole thing is as we believe the gaslighting and the corruption, which creates manipulated truths or corruptions, then that leaves us vulnerable to basically accept the agreement that now we can be under the authority of them because we believed their lies. So now we're under their power and control because of that tacit consent of believing their bullshit, however they're playing it. And so that makes us powerless. And then we lose more and more of our essence, which perceives direct truth. So that's how I'm starting to see this now. So that and this is where I'm getting into what Barbara Bartholick had seen from her angle of just working mostly with alien abductees. But she noticed off the bat, like, not only some of the weird things that were going on and the more nefarious things that were being reported through her wonderful methodology. And, the Ted Rice case is like the prime example. But she would have conversations with, she'd be like, oh no, is this another alien engineered love obsession? And then she would be able to describe it so perfectly. I'm like, oh, how did you know? And she would say, well, this is the alien, what would she called it? Out of love, the alien breeding out of love program.
Yeah.
Or yeah. So it was like, oh, whoa, what is this? And does this go into any of these hybrid alien downlines as they're tweaking us more and more over the generations to create more of them in us? Is this creating a breeding out of love program by normalizing love bites and narcissistic abuse and, just being whatever, right? Controlled and manipulated and following their agenda. Like they're all so good, but like I don't know. I'm starting to see that I was just starting to really get switched on to like seeing more of this profoundly lately. But if I were, this goes in with the gaslighting. Okay. Remember how the narcissist will gaslight and people don't
Mm.
know that means they change and basically do not validate and actually deny your perceptions of something that might be happening or that they've done that causes like some emotional hurt or something that they're perceiving in life, and they're just basically telling them, no, that's not what happened. No, you're wrong. You shouldn't be feeling that way.
You are
Well,
imagining it.
whatever. Yeah, you're like total invalidation that you don't exist. Your feelings are wrong. How dare you? You're invisible to me. It's all about me and what I perceive and what you believe is wrong. Um,
Yeah, it's perfectly illustrated in the movie Gaslight.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
when the husband is trying to drive his wife crazy, and he always goes upstairs to the attic, and then these noises and footsteps. And he always says, no, you're imagining it. And she gets worse and worse and worse. And that is where this term gaslighting actually comes from. Yeah, but and he used it perfectly. He almost succeeded in driving her nuts and getting her institutionalized. Mm.
Yeah, just imagine how much that's actually happened with targeted individuals, what
Mm.
they're calling TIs, even though part of the same, it's still part of the same modus operandi, depending on how it's being executed and by whom and how. But it's the same thing where basically, and this is what the aliens can do that I think was something that Dr. Corrado Malanga noticed, and probably Dr. Roger Lear with some of the implant studies. And now what we're getting, with this later research is the manipulation of perception. Because if they can manipulate our perception, then that's how they can control and take over and basically replace us with another version that would be like a copy or a counterfeit that has them in us. They want to live through us and create, the ultimate mask so they can live in us and in hybridized bodies, which I think is corrupted if it can't manifest fully uh, purity of perception and
Mm.
the ability to even get through the mind control and recognition of basically falseness and abuse, which is wrong, and it should feel wrong to someone. Even if you've been in an abusive family, I mean, it still feels wrong, but maybe you don't know how to change it. But when someone is truly abusive or neglectful or passive aggressive or has a bunch of negative shit going on in them or an entity, something feels wrong. Something feels not right, and it's just going to bug you. And you may not know how to deal with it or what to call it, but hopefully, you can sense that. I mean, animals can sense that easy. So why can't?
Mhm. Yeah. So uh, breeding out love program.
Mhm.
That sounds like there is an agenda. That sounds they have a plan and they have a way forward how to do it. Did Barbara say something about the specifics?
No, I don't think she did, but I knew that she noticed it with specific types of aliens probably more through reptilians, but there was others that worked in and through. I think there's many forms, even the insectoids, even the some of the grays, and others like there wasn't, I don't know, the bird type. I saw a bird type in one of my experiences, and where different ones that might be like cloaked or have these robes on, or they'd be taller, lurking in the back. He might even have a human form or a tall, thin, like a man in a suit kind of form. So there was many different forms, but I think it's the certainly the love bite and the dramatic bad behaviors and dramas that would actually hurt someone. I don't think it's for their spiritual growth, although some people can experience it that way based on their volition to learn and get through and become a better person and not let it destroy them, and to be maintain their authentic self, really. Um, but I think there was also a question of if people who are hybrids, truly, let's say, and one of the women in my book, The Dark Side of Cupid, I did interview her, Marie. She believed herself, she knew that she was genetically augmented, and there's many who are, and that she believed that the effectiveness of the hybrid augmentation, it can only express itself more efficiently or more fully if the quote alien consciousness, it's really the attached entity like embedding and staying inside your body and your consciousness, if that is still present and manages to stay present because the body can accept it because of the genetic alteration, then it can infuse itself in us and live its nature in this hybrid body. But it's really a human and an alien coexisting in a corrupted, well, an alien, an augmented body. But you don't have to accept that consciousness frequency by being more of the authentic, pure human self. And if you switch that off and you no longer accept that, then those expressed characteristics don't necessarily have to express that component, which would be maybe switching off the heart chakra. I mean, if it was ultimate and it was like a psychopathic hybrid entity. And in fact, James Bartley did do a couple interviews with abductees who had to train and work with and experiences with these hybrids that tended to live like in these sequestered secret locations, whether it was an underground base or on a ship, or not necessarily mingling, but mingled only for certain purposes, like being trained how to operate in society or how to buy groceries or how to, you know, act like normal, and they really weren't. And then some of them were like, clearly the way they were described was like psychopathic and narcissistic and controlling and like, yeah. So if that's what Barbie saw in some of these people who claimed, and I saw this early on, where people say, yeah, I'm part alien, you know, and I'm a hybrid. And then I would notice, well, they were much more influenced by the beings that would take them, tell them what to do, tell them what their destiny was, what their purpose was, give them special jobs, help them move. They never had problems as long as they took their orders. Then that was like, well, what's that about? If they're carrying out the alien agenda and they're just following orders, kind of like being mind controlled, then that's a body that's more easily manipulated to be mind controlled. Okay, that's not, to me, that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know if our thing froze, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it says your connection is in the red,
Did mine or yours?
yours.
It always happens. I should have did a prayer. I should have did a prayer.
Yeah, now it's back to yellow at least.
Mm.
Yeah,
That's interesting. You could see that. So,
and now it's okay again.
well,
Yeah.
I that sentence, because we noticed this early on where we were starting to question, you know, some hybrids tended to have more of what I call the more manipulated, controlled type of lives and behaviors and beliefs, but then some did not. In fact, some who knew they were augmented and really made great efforts to find out the truth and not do what the aliens told them came out being really wonderful, extraordinary people who actually did have extra gifts. Like this Marit woman who I interviewed many times. There's a kind of like a hidden understanding amongst many, quote, abductees. They don't call them there. They now we just call them experiencers, or some people assume the contactee, which is really a different kind of mindset, but many of them are more naturally psychic in general. Some of them may have unusual health issues or allergies, or she believed that the central nervous system and the immunological system and sometimes the blood type were unique or changed or different, and that they were really working on the nervous system quality, which I think has to do with perception and how maybe we can heighten our perceptions. So they would want us to be, heightened perceptions for them, but it doesn't mean we can be heightened perceptions for ourselves and do basically what is right and not follow mind controlled orders or whatever. So I don't think all, quote, people who have had these experiences who think they might be augmented are bad or evil. So I want to make that clear, because the demonization of people who have a certain race or gender or a religion or even genetic thing is not really the identifying factor of what we're talking about with this whole counterfeit spirit thing. Because a counterfeit spirit has its own signature. And if that's one thing I would want to make clear, that would be it, so that people don't have to fight with one another or start accusing one another if they see. And that's something else that's going on with, I see this all the time. And once we kind of figured out there was entities who were loose feeding and manipulating or hanging out, like, hanging out over someone and, manipulating a relationship, then people could get create accusations of, well, this person, it's all their fault. They have entities, and they start accusing one another within the community that, they're all bad people. And, but that's actually not a good way to approach it. In fact, some of them may be actually false and being manipulated to accuse and to actually have psychic readings that tell them something that is actually not true, or over time creates a bad effect. So this is where, like, I have to say it, evil works its way in many false light kinds of ways, or, and I've
Mhm.
seen how that can work out over time with people who are misguided through assuming that what they're perceiving is truth from a good source, from a spirit guide, and that spirit guide has a special mission for them. And then you find out down the road how they've really hurt a lot of people over the years and like steered their direction in their lives to a bad place. So I will have to say that because I've seen that too,
Mm.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, how do people distinguish between, you know, real experiences, abductees, contactees, and people who just read a lot about it and are making it up?
Yeah, well, I think there's, well, I don't want to call them fakers. I mean, there was somebody who's very famous in the SSP community who made a big thing in 2017, 18, 19. I think it really started coming out, and, creating a lot of narratives that are making some things very popular about certain kinds of ETs and certain kind of programs and federations and that kind of thing. And then coming out later as saying it was what his own intellectual property, and it really wasn't true. Um, so it kind of left people feeling like, well, was this all BS, or what was really going on? And so I think people can be motivated by different
Was
reasons.
was this person also on Gaia?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Then I know whom you are talking about.
The thing is, though, I mean, there really is a secret space program. There really are military abductions and projects working with aliens, and these people really are having the genuine experiences. So I wouldn't deny that they're having experiences. They're involving themselves in other dimensional realities or other realities where these beings are, functioning on ships or whatever. But I think it's how they might be manipulated based on their volition of what they want to create a narrative that might be manipulated by, let's say, a higher up that is using them, and they don't know that the long game is, it's going to taint people's perceptions in such a way that if they hear about like the secret space program or ETs, they're going to think, well, it's all a bunch of crap because of this person who did that. So, and someone may be manipulated to do something that doesn't have all truth in it, but it doesn't mean that other people who are reporting this are all false. So it tends to make people throw the baby out with the bathwater to discredit anything that comes out, because the real people who are involved, who are actually making alliances with these other races that are, I think, part of the cabal, for lack of a better term, and with humans who are creating problems and, you know, chaos and drama and all that stuff, murder. They don't want the truth to come out, even if it's anecdotal, even if that person doesn't know they're revealing something about their experience. They may have no idea what they're really revealing that someone else doesn't want them to know. And so they could be severely targeted or smear campaigned or co-opted, right? And then pretty soon someone else with a name similar to them is about talking about these things, and they created a fake website and it's like totally different than the original. So that happens all the time. And this is the counterfeit spirit doing the same thing, because it's run by the same, well, counterfeit spirit. So that's, where does that come from? That is like the demiurge or the archontic thing or the adversary that seeks to, because it's not disconnected to some kind of original essence, source of truth, it must do what it's compelled by its own pain of whatever it is to be the mask and to steal, kill, destroy, co-opt, gaslight, smear campaign, you know, copy out, erase your memory, you know, erase you so that you have no memory of the original. So people no longer know what love is. What's healthy love? What's a real experience sound like? You know, when someone really reports a real experience or a real healthy thing, or when they really have, let's say, a connection with Christ, where they remember the eternal nature, so they can't be swayed by a lot of these false practices that are run by hosted people to eventually loose feed your energy and send you into another direction. So there's not enough of the original. So we need to like beef up this original essence of truth and connectedness to, you know, the divine, whatever you want to call it, that's not corrupted, has less corruption in it, so that we can see, because you can't know what, this is the problem with a lot of people who've been abused, or they never knew love, or they've always been in a family of like dysfunctional relationships, and then they go and, you know, have marriages and relationships later that are like bad or worse, and they don't know why. And so if we don't know what the original is in the core of your being, it's hard to recognize the counterfeit or the permutations of the counterfeit. And so that's where the real therapeutic process must be. We have to cultivate the original and reconnect with the original authentic self that really is connected to love and the eternal and their own recognition that they are valuable just as they are, without having to, you know, be the perfect codependent or to be the abuser who just takes everything because otherwise they think they can't get anything at all. So this goes into really like the psychology behind what is complex trauma recovery or codependency or narcissistic abuse recovery, and how we can really get back to our original self without the overlays of the corruptions that made us believe things that weren't true about ourselves and the world and others, so that we can function from a more powerful place that really has to do with pure light and pure consciousness and pure original essence. So that's what I wanted to say, because once we know what it is, we don't have to be fighting about, you know, nation against nation or religion against religion or gender against gender. We'll see it for what it is. But it is amazing. I'm gonna have to say it's quite disconcerting that the normalization of its presence in our reality and in our belief systems, our education, our assumptions of male-female relationships, and, you know, a lot of things. Yeah.
I would agree with that there might be a program to breed out love, simply because over the last couple of decades, we had such an increase of narcissists
Yeah.
Yeah. And you cannot have a healthy relationship with a narcissist. It's simply not possible.
Yeah.
And because of that, I mean, there are certainly other aspects why our society produces such a huge number of narcissists. But it is pretty obvious that there is something going on that is not normal.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think, yeah, there's much more now. I don't know what the
And then
statistic.
on top of that, you have this entire confusion about your own gender, yeah, which to me is artificially induced, yeah, for
Yeah, they
the
could
most
have
part,
done it. Yeah.
yeah. And that is not a healthy gameplay as well.
No. Yeah, and it's always like confusing our identity.
Yeah,
Um, and when they can create the confusion or co-optation of our identity with something else, then that's where I think the problem comes in. Because if you have an identity that's really, let's say, not the real authentic self or an integrated self, then there was going to be some kind of problem and confusion. Yeah.
yeah. If somebody wants to, is male and wants to run around in mini skirts and high heels, yeah, okay, knock yourselves out, but uh, don't make me share your delusion.
Yeah, that's interesting term because a lot of the other talk, and I hear this more from probably the Sam Vaknin, Richard Grannon, and some of the experts in narcissistic abuse recovery, where really when you enter in a relationship, it could even be a love bite relationship with someone who has the narcissistic thing working through them, we go into a shared fantasy of maybe like the ideal projection of them on us or us on them, and then the future faking of the fantasy of the shared fantasy is what kind of gives hope and vivifies the longing after, the keep pining away over this reality that never pays off. And it doesn't pay off. They tend to dangle the carrot, and you got to do this, you got to do that, and then something always comes up, and then you can't meet, or you can't consummate it, or things just don't work out, and there's all these excuses why, da da da. So it's that, and it's my God. Yeah, I forgot what else you said.
Yeah,
Something else just went off on another thing. But
yeah.
the shared fantasy and delusion. So that kind of goes into, well, a fantasy is something that's not true, a corrupted perception of what they think is the truth. So it always goes back to a corruption and a manipulation of perception that might be imposed on someone else, or that they're believing, and they have to keep reifying this delusion, or else. And what I think what's running them is, this vacuous, like horrible void, which I've heard Sam Vaknin, he's really good about explaining all this, but the void of the disconnection of self, of authentic self, and like the shame and the despair and the abandonment and the horrible well of just irreconcilable conflict and bad feelings that was the reason for the split. So they have to go through that well to find their original self, but they tend to avoid it. There's almost like this looped program that keeps going around the original and keeps having to go back to reify the mask, which usually involves some form of abuse and imposition of their lies on someone else. And they have to make someone else bad to do this. So more or less.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's weird because in therapy, the whole idea is to reconnect with, whatever parts of yourself that might have had these horrible emotional conflicts or traumas, and to reconnect in a safe way so that the conflict can be resolved with the real truth of beingness, that we come from something eternal and beautiful and pure as it is, and that we don't need someone else to, shame us and tell us that that's not what we are. But
Mm,
somehow that there's been a disconnect, and the reification of the mask is really I was kind of geeking out about this the other day, but consider this, that sometimes children, I think you see this more with like severe neglect and narcissistic psychopathic abuse, or a borderline parent who's unavailable because they're an addict or something, or they're also abusive. But the horrible, horrible neglect is like an annihilation, that you don't exist.
mm,
Nothing, you don't exist. So if a child has to do something to get the attention of a parent, and maybe the only way to get the attention is to coddle the mommy and coddle the alcoholic and take care of them and be the super goody two shoes that takes care of the whole family and is the peacekeeper, and they won't be a person unless they're always doing good and coddling the narcissist to make sure there's peace and make sure that they're noticed. Otherwise, they don't have a self. And if you take away, that compulsion to be the perfect child, or whatever it is, to have a self, and you take that away, the anxiety of the I'm no self is a terror that is really hard to grasp. So sometimes that's what's driving them, that their original being was never even noticed or acknowledged to exist. So that's part of the what I think a lot of people don't know. If you're in a narcissistic relationship, even with a partner, that you don't exist, you're invisible, you're worthless, you don't matter. That ingrained on you over and over and over and over again is like an invisible abuse that nobody else really notices except you. And then they think you're crazy. Then they make you the crazy one by, if you're reacting to their craziness while they're putting on the mask in front of everybody else, and they're able to easily smear campaign you for being the crazy one, who's a crazy woman who's reacting. um it's amazing how this goes on all the time, where they're making, let's say, the TI, or the one who's really being the abused one, while the mask player, who's a very good actor, can put on this facade that others don't know. So it makes the one who's really experiencing the abuse and the reality of the abuse look like the crazy one. And then they're easily misdiagnosed too. And I've seen this with TIs and with people who are being demonically oppressed and possessed, or really bad stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. As I told you in my email, here in Germany, there is a little craze going on about the Anunnaki and the alien savior, and there will be no World War III, and they are coming with their light ships and rescuing, yeah, well, the chosen ones, and on it goes. And you know, I'm usually flabbergasted by such nonsense, but okay, just for argument's sake, let's say ships are showing up here. I made up my mind. No matter how bad it gets here, I'm not going to the ships. What
Oh,
is
no
your
tips. Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah. Yeah.
so?
I would, I don't think that's our natural way. Our natural way is to live on the earth. Yeah. Not in
Yeah.
space, wherever. Yeah. Or underground in their dungeons and caves. Their experimental labs, like, whoops, guess where you get to go? You're a little human trafficking operation. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But
It
yeah.
reminds me of this old TV series, the old one, Twilight Zone. They have a new one.
Oh, really? Okay.
But I remember in the old one, there is one episode, it's called To Serve Men. And so humanity has contact. They are there. And then after a while, they take a few humans with them. And then there is somebody, they have this book. And they say, yeah, to serve men. And then while people are starting to enter, somebody has deciphered it and says, guys, don't go there. It's a cookbook. They serve
Oh,
you literally.
a cookbook. Oh no. Wow. Yeah, it's two meanings with one word. Isn't that interesting?
Hmm.
Yeah. There's a lot of, well, it's hard to tell like who's good and who's bad, or who's bad and pretending to be good, and that I guess goes back to discernment of what would be original and authentically good, and be able to discern that in behaviors and essence and frequency. But I have to say, there's a lot of lack of discernment that kind of surprises me. And I've seen this, I think it's a spiritual, uh, well, it could be emotional. Like if someone is unrecovered trauma, or they haven't really gotten in touch with all their stuff and integrating, then they're more likely to not perceive clearly and be able to be misled. Um, that happens in relationships too. But spiritually, you can have a lack of discernment where, you know, if we want to believe a lie, even if it's a very ingenious one crafted that's hard for us to figure out with our intellectual level, then that willingness to believe a lie takes away our ability to perceive the truth. And that's actually a biblical there's a scripture about that. If we choose to believe a lie, then we can be taken over by the delusions of that essence, which is of the lie. And so that means we actually lose our perception, because if that imbues more of us and takes more space inside of us, there's not enough of the pure original to allow a perception that's loud enough to say, hey, there's something wrong with this. So spiritual deception is very common, and I'm surprised at how often it takes place, even with people who seem like really, really intelligent. But intelligence alone is not enough to give you spiritual perception and wisdom. And that's really sad. But I would have to say I've seen this a lot with kind of like the channeling. And it's actually, there's some cases in the dark side of Cupid, which actually will bring me to another topic that is another way of understanding and perceiving this. For example, one of the categories in the dark side of Cupid, as let's say the types and themes of relationships, there was like 4 or 5 categories in there. And I think I put it as the second category. It was like mythic dramas and channeled and spirit guides and channeled entities, and within a love bite or even a twin flame kind of thing, where one person is, let's say, the channeler or receiving messages from a type of spirit guide, or maybe it's an alien, we don't know. Sometimes they know what it is, but they'll call it a spirit guide, and they have a special mission. And that mission might be a number of things, but that being can direct them to have a relationship and manipulate the setup and the relationship, like so that they'll have this, twin flamey feelings, but then they'll lead that person astray with the the messages that are coming in. And some of them can be very high level and accurate, but they'll play out the couple like a grand mythic drama that's as if it's almost, it feels like it's biblical in its immensity of love, and this great love affair that is epic, like the gods and the goddesses. So you get this imagery of ancient gods and goddesses like off on their little Mount Olympus or whatever, drinking their wine and watching the entertainment below of these people playing out dramas, that they're manipulating this theater to get off on the entertainment of these mythic dramas, and telling them that, this is their mission in life and you're doing it for a good cause. And they're just, playing you like puppets in these grand dramas. So that was something that tended to play out a lot more within what kind of feels like a twin flame. So that is something, and I think it's the same, false gods or whatever, who are playing us like a game, and that they can manipulate us in many ways to, have us be kind of like this theater production for them.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Do you think it is possible that one element that plays a role might be jealousy, that these races, entities, whatever it might be, do not have the ability for love, compassion, empathy? It might be that their societies just simply run in a different way, and that it it is one of the reasons why they think they have to breed it out because they don't know what to do with it.
Or they don't have it, so they don't, I mean, so they don't know it, so that they're just going to breed it out and not know what they just did, or
Mhm, mhm.
I would think that they would know, but supposedly
Yeah,
story
but
is,
knowing intellectually is one thing, but experiencing and having the capability of such feelings, that's a whole different story.
yeah, I agree.
So maybe they understand intellectually, yes, uh, what you see there is love, compassion, empathy, but we don't have it. And that is why we feel it is a little bit dangerous to us. It makes you vulnerable. You know what I mean?
It makes them unpredictable
Mhm,
and like dangerous because humanity has that quality of being unpredictable. Like I remember I was watching a video, it was some, special ex Green Beret or whatever, whatever it was talking about dangerous personalities. And one of them was the kind of person who feels like they don't have anything left to lose becomes
mhm.
more dangerous because
Oh,
they're likely just to do whatever they can without caring of the consequences. So,
yeah.
but I think that's always been a concern with the controllers, even in who are human or
Yeah.
pretending to, that they don't want this unpredictability of, yeah, of human behavior, especially when we love each other and that we care for one another and we don't follow the rules and we stop being the order followers for their long-term agendas for destruction. Because a lot of the long-term agenda is, if you could see it and perceive it, but I'm not sure the ones in charge see it that way. I think they just see that they're doing an important job of bringing order out of chaos and then refining the herd to a more controllable, um, you know implanted, emotionally vacant, mind controlled, lack of empathy robot that just sits on a computer all day and has some hive mind. I mean, I've heard people who've seen the future and they've like talked about like autistic hive mind, but almost alien and not empathic, not really connecting with normals. And yeah, kind of like that. There's something wrong with that. I mean, that's what people fear, like in these Christian circles, where if there is a mark of the beast, and maybe it's some kind of bio implantable thing that infuses in our body but changes us over time to create kind of this disconnect and a manipulation of perception so that we don't notice what we're losing, so we don't know how to get it back, and pretty soon people are just following orders and really passive and addicted to their cell phones and computers, and then that is like the what gets you more and more addicted. In fact, this brings me to I don't know if you've heard of the brain surgeon named Dr. Jack Cruz, who has
Mhm.
done many videos and exposés on medical things and scientific facts about, especially about light, sunlight, like red light, infrared, and also blue light, which is the primary blue light that comes through our digital screens, phones, computers, and LED lights, and that long-term effect with blue light, it agitates the brain for one, makes us fat, and it ruins our metabolism and our mitochondria, and it also makes us so that we're more docile and easily controlled. So one of these discussions he was having, it was like a 4-hour interview, and I put it on my Telegram page, but it was kind of disconcerting, but it's not unknown to those of us who know how, okay, Project Paperclip and how that evolved, and the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, along with Alien whatever, then we're working with some pretty advanced models of mind control programming that is quite streamlined with many more things than the old-fashioned, trauma-based mind controlled as they were described in the early days. So basically, he was saying that, these really advanced ones have been eugenically modified or eugenically, streamlined from certain families, and extremely intelligent, usually Mensa level, really smart and easily mind controlled and probably dissociated, so that these people were engineered to be in high positions of especially the tech communities in Silicon Valley, for example, and probably the military industrial complex and like the scientific ones. And because they're good order followers and they maintain their mind control more easily, but they're also extremely brilliant, but they don't perceive some of the things that would be like emotional intelligence, or like, this is obvious mind control, like, don't you see this? But they may not perceive it, and they're good at following orders. So he was talking about how with the blue light and how it has been deliberately created to create problems and to make the MK Ultra and the programming so that 55% of people who watch the screens are already mind controlled. So if you already have something foundationally embedded in you as a program, all you have to do is look at the computer or the phone every day, and it just reinforces programming, takes away your perception, so they don't see what's going on unless you pull away from that environment and that reinforcement of the programming. So we're dealing with constant reinforcement of corrupted things, of the counterfeit spirit, which is mind control programming to carry out the agenda of the original counterfeit people or beings. That's how I see it, even from a spiritual perspective. So we know now that that is true. They've created modified people who are extremely brilliant, but there's something missing where they don't see it. Like, how can the most brilliant people with IQs of 150 plus not see this?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's either they are lacking something or it is willful ignorance. There are not too many choices.
Well, I'll still have to say that, the manipulated relationship is probably the most effective way of compromising and maintaining a type of handling and control and like chaos, so that it's really hard to do the recovery work if you know that that's what you want to do. And that is probably one of the biggest, challenges I think that a lot of people have, even people who don't have, let's say, abductions or whatever, but I'm sure there's many who they just can't seem to find the stillness and the time and the wherewithal to go into those places to recover original essence and recover the peace that will give you the truth without having to go all this external knowledge everywhere. So it's kind of like that, where there's this addiction to all this knowledge, especially on the internet. But really, if you do your own, internal work, some of the greatest truths come through just being still and doing like a meditation retreat, or just, doing the inner child work, or, going out in nature and just, closing off the windows of how everything else is coming in and just being still, because I believe that truth comes in naturally when it's allowed to be there, you know?
Yeah, stillness is definitely, yeah, a requirement for that.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to do when there's bombs going off in your neighborhood and dead bodies in trees and drones flying around, and are we gonna have World War III tomorrow? Oh, I don't know. Well, prep. That's just like insane.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. So, Eve, we already have reached the top of the hour, and we are going to see the patrons on the other side.